Hi there. Let's talk about section 4.3. Yes, this is out of order. We're going to do 4.3 and then we're going to go back to 4.2 because I really want to focus on point slope form for a second here. So point slope form looks like this. Y minus y1 equals m and then parentheses x minus x1. Notice it's different from slope intercept, y equals mx plus b. And notice there are two things in here. The m still stands for slope and always will. The x1, y1 stands for a point. So when we do the same things, we're going to substitute things in, only this time we're going to have a point instead of me telling you or you finding the b on the graph. So the only thing you really have to be careful about is the signs in that formula. When you do y minus some number, it's a subtract right there. And this equation, this point slope form, you can use to help you find any equation of a line, and we're going to start talking about that in this section. So notice on this little graph right here, I've got a point, x1, y1. Notice the line's got a rise over run. We still are going to need to know the slope. We are going to need to know a point, and then we can go from there. So let's talk about writing equations given a point and the slope. This is about as simple as we can get. I think it's even easier than slope-intercept. Use the point slope form to start. Y minus y1 equals m, and then x minus x1. And then you're going to substitute in your m and the coordinate of any given point. So m goes in there. Make sure you keep the parentheses, your x1, y1, and again, make yourself a little note. Watch the signs. And I'll talk about this when we do an example or two. So let's skip practice 1. Just because there's a lot of stuff happening there, let's just focus on writing equation. It says to write an equation in point slope form for a line that passes through -1, 5 with a slope of -3, then graph the equation. I'm going to start drawing your attention up here because it's going to tell you what kind of answer I want as we go through 4.3 and then back to 4.2. It's going to tell you what form I want the answer to be in. So I've got a line, it passes through -1, 5. So this is a point, right? This is an x and a y, 1 and 1. It tells me the slope, or m, is -3. So I can substitute everything in there. As a matter of fact, I could put my -3 in there just like that. I know it's going to be y minus something. Oops, put that in the wrong spot. I know it's going to be y minus something, and I know it's going to be x minus something. So when I put my y1 in there, that means I'm going to replace that y1 with a 5. So I've got y minus 5 equals -3, and then x minus. But notice this is a -1 up here that I'm substituting in for the x1. So what happens when I put a -1 into this x minus -1? That'll become an x plus 1. So my final answer is y minus 5 equals a -3 times x plus 1 in parentheses. And I can easily do this, but if we're going to graph this, it's going to be just like slope-intercept, only our starting point is not going to be the b. I'm going to go to -1, 5. I've got a point on my graph, that's the best I know, but now I can use that slope, the rise over run, -3 over 1, so I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3 over 1, down 1, 2, 3 over 1. Some of you are going to already notice we just found a b value when we started graphing that, and we're going to work towards that as we go. But this is all I'm asking for is a y minus 5 equals -3 times an x plus 1. Now, let's do example number 3. It says write a slope-intercept formula of an equation. Y equals mx plus b be careful, with an x-intercept of 4 and a slope of negative 3 over 2. Now let's start this on the graph instead of starting with the equation. So the x-intercept is at 4, so that means I can go over to 1, 2, 3, 4 on the x-axis. What would be the coordinates of that point? That's a sneaky problem right there because that actually is an ordered pair. We go over 4 and up 0. If we can recognize that, we now have our x1 and our y1 to put into an equation. The slope is negative 3 over 2. So there's our rise over run. So I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3, and right 2, down 1, 2, 3, right 2. Of course, if I run out of space, I could go the opposite direction. So if I graph this completely, I've got a couple of things that I could see here. I want you to see that when I just graphed all those points, even though I put more than 3 on there, I actually hit my y-intercept. My y-intercept should be at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now I know my b, right? So I can easily write this equation. I know the m and I know the b. Y equals negative 3 halves x plus 6. I found the b from the graph. If for some reason I didn't know how to do that, I could still use my other equation, but let's stick with that for just a minute. I'm going to show you some other ways to do this later, but in section 4 too. But this seems like a good way to do it. Let's use our graph to find our y-intercept. So we're going to do the same thing with problem number 4. Let's skip 4. We could do that one as a practice. Write an equation in standard form. So here's the thing. There are going to be times, just like that one where I just said to write that in slope-intercept form. I'm going to also ask you to write the equations in standard form. Everybody remember standard form is when our x's and y's are on one side, numbers are isolated on the other side. So we're going to use our point slope form. Oops, y minus y1 equals m, x minus x1. We're going to use the distributive property with that slope. And then we're going to use algebra to get all of our variables on one side, all of our numbers on the other side. And I believe, there we go, number 4, we're going to make sure that it is in ax plus by equals c form. So we're going to have to really isolate the numbers, get all the variables to one side, and we'll have ourselves a standard form equation. So without a graph and everything, let's just practice this part. Let's do number 6. Y plus 3 equals 1/2 x minus 8. So it's already got our point slope formula, right? We've got that. Our second step is to distribute. So I've got y plus 3 doesn't change. 1/2 x minus 4, if I did my math and signs right. So now we've got things everywhere. Notice here's where all my variables are. Here's where all my numbers are. So we're going to have to do some work with this. So I would start by probably subtracting the 1/2 x. When you subtract 1/2, please put the x on it. Some people aren't, and then it turns into, I don't know, what is a like term. So these guys cross out. I'm left with negative 1/2 x plus y plus 3. That y is a plus because there's no sign in front of it, equals negative 4. So all my variables are over there on the left. However, I've got a number of 3 still sitting there. So I'm going to minus 3 minus 3. So negative 1/2 x plus y equals a negative 7. Check my math. And now there's 2 problems. One problem is that we've got a fraction, right? We don't like fractions. So I'm going to have to times everything by 2, whatever our denominator is. However, that fraction is also negative. Do you remember us saying that we can never have a negative value or a fraction? So I'm going to put a little arrow up here. can't be negative or a fraction. So that means I'm going to have to multiply everything, both sides, by a 2. Because if I multiply negative 1/2 by 2, now I've got a whole number. But I also want that negative 1/2 to become a positive 1/2. So if I make that 2 a negative on both sides and distribute, negative 2 times negative 1/2 becomes a positive 1x. Negative 2 times y becomes a minus 2y. We're allowed to have negatives on the y term. We are not allowed to have negatives on the a term or the x term. Over here on the other side, when I do negative 7 times negative 2, I get myself a positive 14. So here's my final answer. X minus 2y equals 14. That is a lot of work to have to do that, and that's a lot of old stuff. So we have to distribute, and then we have to move things around using inverse operations. All right, so lesson summary. Just tell me what's the equation for point-slope form. And your practice problem. If I give you that equation, tell me the m and the point. No graphing, no nothing. I don't even ask you for the y-intercept or anything. Just tell me the slope and a point on that line. That is it for section 4.3. We'll see you next time for 4.2.